What is happening, my fine fellow fast cats? I think there is a common misconception out there that as we get older, we're going to ride slower. And in today's podcast and video, we're going to talk about the 4 ways to not let that happen, to beat father time and ride faster into our 50s and 60s. Now, one thing we do know that is inevitable is that testosterone and growth hormone levels naturally decline, making recovery harder and training load tougher to handle. And so I'm going to briefly explain the science of aging and then move into smart habits to stay fast and how masters athletes should train in order to keep progressing. And specifically, we'll go over these 4 things: nutrition, recovery recommendations, age-appropriate intervals, and then the 5 ways your training plan should be masters specific. Now, to get the most out of yourself, it's not just doing one or a few of these, but it's doing all 4 together in tandem. And if you're not, you're leaving watts on the table. And I don't want that. We don't want that. We want you to be your best. Real quick, before we get into it, why am I qualified to talk about training for master cyclists? I'm 53, pushing 54, and I've been coaching master cyclists to impressive results for over 20 years. I myself practice all 4 of these, and I am pushing an FTP north of 300 watts and a percent body fat of less than 8%. I'm skinny, I'm fast, and it didn't happen overnight. And I've been working on this for years, and I'm going to tell you the science, and then I'll show you how to practically adopt this for yourself. So let's jump in. One of the best things about cycling, it's a lifelong sport, but as we train and improve as aging athletes, it's different than when we were younger. What you did in your 20s and 30s no longer applies. I barely did any of this in my 20s and 30s. I wish I had, because I would have been a lot faster. But now we must evolve our approach to match what our bodies are capable of. And the problem that as we get older is it's the less we can recover from. And why is this? And going back to my endocrinology class in graduate school, starting around age 30, our testosterone levels decline by about 1% every year. And our growth hormone levels drop even faster. So by the time we hit 60 years old, we can have 30% less testosterone and 50% less growth hormone circulating around in our body compared to our peak years. And for women, the hormonal shift is even more dramatic. Estrogen and progesterone levels plummet during premenopause and menopause. And by age 50, estrogen levels can be as low as 10% of premenopausal levels. And these changes significantly impact your recovery, muscle maintenance, and your energy levels. And it's the number one reason us older athletes need more time to recover, because building back muscle happens more slowly. And so for the podcast listeners out there, I would encourage you to go over to our YouTube channel, because over here we're looking at a graph of the natural hormone decline with age. We show a graph of how testosterone and growth hormone decline from really in your late 20s all the way for the rest of your life. There's not much you can do with that. You can slow it down, and we're going to talk about that with nutrition. So declining testosterone levels means you build muscle slower. That's why it takes us longer to recover. But have no fear. The one cool thing about as we get older, we get wiser. And you're going to learn how to beat father time. And the best way to start with that is your nutrition. And so there's 5 areas of nutrition that you should pay attention to. It's one of the simplest and most often overlooked ways to recover better and maintain muscle and perform at a high level as you age. And let's start with protein. And that is the building block of your muscles. You literally are what you eat. And basically, in a nutshell, if you take one thing away from this podcast and video, it's you need to increase your protein intake as a master's athlete. Now, we'll also go over vitamin D and zinc and magnesium, and you need to not do a low-fat diet. Healthy fats are absolutely imperative. And then also same way with carbohydrate, you need to fuel your recovery. And so let's talk about protein recommendations real quick. When you were younger, you probably could get away 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram per day. And then now as you age, you need to bump that up to 1.6 to 2.0 kilograms grams per kilogram of body weight per day. And this is supported by the American College of Sports Medicine, Philip and Moore. And older athletes require higher protein intakes to stimulate the same level of muscle protein synthesis as younger athletes do, to a phenomenon called anabolic resistance. Anabolic resistance is where, as we age, our muscles become less responsive to protein intake and training stimulus, and therefore a higher protein intake is needed to preserve muscle mass, aid recovery, support immune function, and prevent sarcopenia, which is muscle loss with age. Now, because of anabolic resistance, master cyclists need more protein than younger riders. What does 1.6 to 2.0 grams per kilogram of body weight per day look like? Let's use a 170-pound male as an example. That's 77 kilograms, and times 1.8 grams per kilogram. That's 138 grams of protein per day. And then, so for reference, one egg equals 6 grams of protein. One scoop of protein powder equals about 20 grams. A 6-ounce piece of salmon equals 40 grams. A 6-ounce chicken breast equals 50 grams. So if you have 2 eggs for breakfast, a chicken sandwich at lunch, salmon for dinner, a scoop of protein powder, you're about at 112 grams for the day. And that's undercutting what you need. What you can do is you just increase your protein intake, increase your servings, increase your protein snacks. And folks, you can ask Coach Cat in the chat, how many grams of protein is this? How many grams of protein is that? You can ask for a sample meal plan for the day with enough protein for 140 grams per day. Again, it's one of the simplest, most often overlooked ways to recover better, maintain muscle mass, and improve your performance at age. Also, the winning in the kitchen meal plans, you will notice they're very rich in protein. We talk about the Salmon Watts recipe, Kickin' Chicken, the Chipotle burrito bowl. Every meal has protein in it, and every snack has protein in it. Very important to maintain protein. Every single meal has fat in it. Why do we have fat? Believe it or not, cholesterol is a building block of testosterone. So your saturated fatty acids get converted to cholesterol. Cholesterol, through the biochemical pathway of testosterone production, gets turned into testosterone. So if you're on a low-fat diet, your testosterone is going to run lower. Have a healthy fat diet, including saturated fats. That's where cholesterol comes from. You also want to have a diet rich in omega-3s, and those are best from avocados and salmon. But also, to get the saturated fat in there, you want to include eggs and meat and olive oil and nuts. One thing that drove me nuts, last time I went to my doctor, she told me to eat less eggs. My cholesterol is high. And don't get me started, but this would be evidence of trying to maintain your testosterone levels and ride your bike better. With that said, we do recommend a diet that about 15% fat and 15% protein, 70% carbohydrate availability. So backing up, also vitamin D, very important. If you're going outside to ride your bike, your body is going to naturally make vitamin D from sunlight. But if you're training indoors, which a lot of us do 4 or 5 months out of the year, it's really important to supplement with vitamin D. And you can do that with a simple supplement, 2,000, 4,000 IUs per day. And you can double check your vitamin D levels with a blood test. And your values should be in the 40 to 60 nanogram per milliliter range. Zinc and magnesium, also very important. They are a very strong component of a winning in the kitchen diet, where you're having a lot of leafy green vegetables like rocket lettuce, kale, and spinach. And again, optimal blood test values that you can test for zinc are 90 to 200 micrograms per deciliter and 2 to 2.2 micrograms per deciliter for magnesium. I mentioned healthy fats, very important as building blocks to testosterone. You may see on the internet a lot of stuff about masters micronutrient deficiencies, but by and large, if you're consuming a diet rich in fruits and leafy green vegetables, you're getting ample nutrients. Americans have the richest pee in the world. We literally take all these supplements and we just pass them right through our system and pee them out. Really, a diet rich in leafy green vegetables is, there you go. Again, if you have any specific questions about nutrients, ask Coach Cat. It's trained on all the sports nutrition and can answer your questions readily available. With regards to carbohydrates, super important. It takes energy to build muscle. And so you want to pair good carbohydrate availability with your protein intake. Low carb fasted training leads to increased cortisol, and that leads to a decreased testosterone post-exercise. So eat up. You want to pair your carbohydrate and protein intake to enhance muscle protein synthesis. That's what's going to speed up recovery. But overall, treat your nutrition as a way to fuel your workouts and to recover better. In my best performances, I was eating a lot of protein, a lot of carbohydrate equals a lot of watts. Now, before we move on to like recovery, I want to briefly mention blood work because I hinted at that with zinc and vitamin D. You can detect any nutritional or hormonal deficiency with a simple blood test. And everything that I've mentioned thus far is possible to measure. It's just like a field test for your FTP. And you can regularly monitor hormone levels, including testosterone and cortisol and cholesterol and vitamin D, zinc, magnesium. You can look at inflammation markers and your cortisol. And really, blood testing deserves its own podcast, so stay tuned. But really, that is it in its essence, is 2 to 3 blood tests per year. You can use a platform like Inside Tracker, but you can also just make an appointment at Quest Diagnostics. That's where I got my last blood test. It cost, you had to order specific blood panels, but you make the appointment, you pay for it, you go in, you get your blood tested, it shows up in your inbox a few days later. It's boom. And then you're able to verify your levels just in the report. It's a nice peace of mind and reassurance. If your training goes sideways or off track, one of the biggest things to rule out is just that all your levels are where they should be. And if not, it's something's low or something's off. It's maybe the training that you were doing wasn't the culprit. It's your blood levels. And then really that can mean nutritional intervention or just you need some more rest. So we'll talk about that more in the future, but let's move on to master's recovery. And this is one of the most important things to understand is that it just takes more time to recover as a master's athlete. When I was 30 years old, I could race Saturday, I could race Sunday. Didn't even notice a decline in Sunday performance based on Saturday racing. Now, not so much. I can race once a weekend. I can't do intervals 2 days in a row, not like full gas ones like VO2s and anaerobic work or threshold, but that's the most important thing to remember. Recovery takes more time, and you got to give yourself more time to recover. And you need to make sure your training plan gives you more time to recover, really in these 4 ways: timing, hours per week, the amount of intervals, and then in other times of the year, you want to make sure your training plan includes strength training and then also mobility and flexibility work. So let's go over the first 3. So when I'm talking about timing, you really need to be careful of the timing of your hard days in relation to each other. So you ride hard Saturday, Sunday. When do you ride hard next? Is it Tuesday? Is it Wednesday? Yeah. If you're 30, it's probably Tuesday. If you're over 40 or 50 or over 60, it might be Wednesday. A little bit of experimentation needed in there. You can use your sleep and your HRV as an indicator. Honestly, the best thing you can do to experiment with that is your power output and how you felt. You pair how you felt and the power output that you were able to belt out on Tuesday as a measurement of your recovery from your training. Guess what? If it wasn't that great, you needed more recovery, and then you should have done your intervals on Wednesday. Our Sweet Spot Part 4 plan takes that into account. We have you ride hard on Saturdays and Sundays. Monday is off, and then Tuesday is a Zone 2 day. It's one of those tweener days where you can train, but you can't train hard, and so it's like a transitional day, and it's always good. When in doubt, ride in Zone 2. So you ride in Zone 2 on Tuesday, being super careful you don't ride too hard, and then wham, you just slam it on Wednesday, and that's a good master's training regimen. If you are racing or riding hard on Saturdays and Sundays on the weekend, and you're finding that your Tuesday intervals aren't going so great, experiment with doing them on Wednesday. It just means you need a little bit more time to recover. And if you've tried that and you're still not recovered, now you need to look at nutrition and how much you're sleeping, because wise man once said, there's no such thing as overtraining, just under recovery. So with that said, that's how we think about timing. Now, in terms of number 2, hours per week, Let's just go back to when you were in your 20s and 30s. You could ride all day, 12 plus hours a week, 15, you had no kids, you had no job. But there was more to it than that. You're pumping just testosterone and growth hormone through your veins and arteries, and you're recovering like a champ. Your time to recover is just way less than it is now. And so what you can do now in your 50s and 60s is less than what you can do in your 30s. Me, for example, I was pretty good 12 to 14 hours a week, even up to when I was like 35, even like when I was 40-ish. But now I did an 11-hour week last week and I was pretty whooped. I'm going to try to do a 12 this week, but that's at the end of a block before a rest week. That's going to be like the max. But really all winter, I've been good on 6 to 8 hours of training per week and progressing quite nicely. And that's literally about half of the volume I was doing in my 30s. So guys, gals, that's how we think about it. You want to choose a training plan with the amount of volume, hours per week in relation to your age. Our training plans have 3 levels. We have a 4 to 8 basic level, an 8 to 12 hours per week intermediate level, and then the advanced level, 12 to 14, 15 hours plus. That's for the young bucks, that's for the pros. But really what you want to think about, if you're over 50, you have a job and you're been training for 3 years or less, that's your basic level, 4 to 8 hours a week. If you're in your 30s and 40s, job, career, kids, busy, intermediate 8 to 12 is where you want to be. You can modulate those and use those for periodization, do a basic first and an intermediate level. But when masters athletes come to us for coaching, and they got a problem to solve, underperformance, and we look at their training volume, yeah, a lot of times we see athletes riding too much. Half of that is junk miles. And the definition of junk miles to me is you're riding, you're not accomplishing anything physiologically, but you're also not recovering. So when I hear 50 plus athletes bragging they're doing 18 hours of training per week, I'm gonna look at their intensity and then I'm gonna look at their recovery. And oftentimes, bump them down to 10 hours where every single day is on point, you're doing work, you're recovering when you're not on the bike. That's when their FTP just breaks through a plateau. That is what we're talking about on volume. And then the third thing that your training plan should do is have age-appropriate number of intervals. Again, I'll take you back to when I'm 30. I'm belting out VO2 max intervals, 2 sets, 3 by 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off. That's 30 minutes time in zone. Now, it's very simple. A master's-based VO2 max workout. Same duration, but you're doing 2 sets of 2 by 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off. Time in zone is 20 minutes. That interval workout is hard. You're going just as hard, but your time in zone is less. And that's how I adjust athletes' intervals to be age appropriate. You give a less of a dose, it takes less time to recover. If you can and again, I have athletes that are like, oh, I can do what I could do when I was in my 30s. The thing is that you can't do is recover in a better amount of time. So you could do 30 minutes time in zone, but you just extended your time to recover by a day, for example. And so a nice balanced training to recovery is doing 20 minutes time in zone from just those 4 VO2s, and then you bounce back faster and you're able to move on with your training. So that's how I think about it. We have podcasted about training load for master cyclists. Go check it out. That was an episode a few years back. But basically, if you're following 4 to 8 hours of training per week and you're busy an hour a day during the week and then some endurance or longer rides on the weekends, that's going to net you a good amount of gains. And guess what? You're going to be able to recover from it. That's the key. You could probably do 8 to 12, but you can't recover from it. And that's the key. Being able to do the training and then recover from it. And when you combine the two together, that's when you get faster. Okay. So that's like that's the 3 components of your training plan. I'm gonna get into the other 2 in a second, but I want to talk about sleep here really quick because it's massively important. I'll just use this morning as an example. I just wake up naturally before my alarm, 5:30 a.m. Birds are chirping, the light is starting to get a little bit through the windows, and then all of a sudden my brain turns on. Next thing you know, I'm out of bed, I'm working. And it's so different than when I'm in my 30s where you had to set an alarm to get up mid-morning. You just naturally could sleep better. And so as we get older, you got to actually try harder on your sleep. It's called sleep hygiene. Now, my biggest piece of advice is go to bed at the same time each night. keep your room dark, keep it cool, keep it quiet. And then track your sleep if you're not already. A Whoop, an Aura, Apple Watch, a Garmin smartwatch, even a Fitbit, they work well. They're all going to give you roughly the same information. And what you want to do is just track how much you're sleeping. They're also compatible with CoachCat. You can send them to CoachCat. You'll get a daily analysis of your sleep and your HRV, and then we'll compare that to how much training you did yesterday and then the week before, help you out with that training to recovery balance. But I've seen a lot of good cyclists sabotage their training with poor sleep hygiene. And then conversely, I know a lot of good cyclists that they're successful because they get good sleep. And that's one of the components of our Successful Master Cyclists that we've put out in our training tip, the 7 Habits of Successful Master Cyclists. Sleep is at the top of the chart. How much sleep? That can be debated and it's individual. The thing is, you just don't want to be 30 years ago, you're like people would brag in the 80s, oh, I only need 2 hours of sleep. Not like that for cycling. You know, front cyclists, they're sleeping reported 10 hours, 11 hours a night plus a nap. If you can nap as a master cyclist, go for it. I found a 20-minute nap like a luxury. If my house gets quiet and the kids leave and the planets align and I can doze off for 20 minutes, that's super good. Go check out our Better Cycling Through Sleep training tip on our website. And in terms of like hours, I've been averaging 7.8 hours of sleep on average per week after week. I had a bad week and a bad month in April. This past month, more stress, less sleep, down to 7. I can feel it a little bit. If you can get more than 8, that is primo. If you're getting less than 6, probably not good. You want to take a look at your sleep hygiene and see if you can't think in terms of 15 more minutes a night on average per week and try to increase your sleep by 30 to 45 minutes over the next 3 to 6 months. It'll make a real big difference in how you feel when you wake up in the morning and then your power output on the bike and then consequently the amount of progress you make with your training. All right, we talked about the 3 things of your training plan, but there are 2 more, and that is strength training, weightlifting, and then also mobility and flexibility work. And so let's tackle mobility and flexibility work first, because on Mondays and Fridays of every Fast Cat training plan, we have you doing yoga, Dr. Eric Goodman's foundations, and the Revo band work. And what that is, it's strength and flexibility and mobility all rolled up into one. Yoga is wonderful for flexibility and strength and just range of motion. Do you guys ever sit on the floor or get up from a chair and you're stiff? Yeah, you just need to work on your mobility and flexibility. By doing so, you're going to increase or maintain your range of motion, reduce injury risk, and support efficient cycling form. And when I say reduce injury risk, like sadly, if you crash on your bike, you're going to get hurt less and come back faster if you've been doing your strength and mobility work and when you crash. The Dr. Eric Goodman's foundation, it's wonderful. No back pain ever. It's really, yoga is tremendous for all the flexibility and the twisting and the balance, and it's getting in all those things we're not going to capture in a squat. Speaking of squats, we absolutely 100% recommend weightlifting training for master cyclists. If you're not, over time, years, like over a decade, sarcopenia is going to take hold, and that's just a reduction in muscle mass, and you don't want to lose it. Think about when you're 50 and when you're 60. If you lift weights, you're going to have the same muscle mass. Your quads are going to be just as big. If you don't lift weights, your legs, you just lose muscle mass. So let's talk about lifting weights. What does that mean? Really, for us, we've podcasted about it many times. Weightlifting, a 10-week phase with heavy lifting, hypertrophy, doing heavy, like low weight, high rep, high weight, low rep, and then medium weight, high rep. And that's hypertrophy, strength, and power. 10 weeks, squat, leg press, leg curl. Don't do that year round. Do that for 10 weeks. And then a lot of people are raising their hands. I have heard on the internet, you're supposed to lift weights year round. And there's a caveat to that. It depends on what you're training for, what your goals are. If you're a performance-based cyclist, you're entering an event or you're trying to increase your FTP, you want to stop lifting weights and concentrate on the bike. You're going to recover better because there's a lot of stress from lifting weights, and you're going to make more power output. Now, if you're just training for general fitness, group rides, things like that, lifting weights year round can be advantageous. Maybe just not as much as when you do a 10-week weightlifting plan, which is 2 to 4 times per week. During the season, you want to think about 1 time per week. We do have a 16-week sweet spot plan with strength and conditioning, and that's body weight. That's not squats and leg press. So it's really important to define what weightlifting is. Squats, leg press, a lot of stress. Only do that in the off season. X-nay that when you get into the season. And then you want to do like the strength and mobility work, like the band work, the body weight, really good. Maybe a little bit of kettlebell swings, some deadlifts. We talk about Coach Andrew's deadlift, the concentric only. That's a great way to maintain the strength you've gained in the weight room all year round. You can do that on Sundays and Thursdays before your rest days because you won't sabotage excuse me, you won't sabotage one of your workouts the next day. Okay, let's see. So we talked about strength and mobility, and really that is it. So we talked about hormones, the science of aging, nutrition, and how your training plan the 5 ways your training plan should meet your age. If you have any questions about that, let us know in the comments. What are you doing in your training that's different now than maybe what you did then? I have to say, when I was 35, my FTP was 350 watts. Now it's 300. Hey, and sometimes it's lower than 300. In fact, in the off season, my FTP goes down a lot more than it did when I was younger. That's just a part of getting older. Your eyesight gets a little less, your hearing goes. It's part of aging. But I'm here to tell you, if you implement good nutrition, good sleep, age-appropriate training plan, you can be as good in your 50s as you were in your 35s or 30s. You can improve more, you're smarter, you got all those miles in your legs, so your durability and your time to exhaustion is gonna go down. But yeah, let us know in the comments what you think, and thanks for listening or watching on the YouTube channel. Again, if you're listening and you wanna go see some graphs and charts of what we just talked about, head on over to our YouTube channel. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Hope you have a great weekend. You know what to do, work hard, ride fast, have fun, and as always, FTF. Peace.